The rest of the world ponders on the United States' proposal for peace in Ukraine, which may include concessions of land in the Donbas to Russia. Ukrainian soldiers have warned against trusting Russia and have said that Putin was the first guarantor of Ukraine's safety and in turn himself attacked Ukraine. Let's in fact listen to what a soldier on the front line has shared.
Що ми тоді тут воюємо, якщо вони хочуть, щоб ми то все то їм давали. Ми тут захищаємо наші кордони, щоб потім просто взяти та віддати. Ну, смисл тоді оцього всього, всіх жертв. Люди військові зараз гинуть просто капець як масово, плюс обстрілюють мирні міста. Ну, я думаю, що вірити їм не можна, того що, ну як вам сказати, вони були одним із перших гарантів нашого захисту, а по факту вийшло як? Що вони на нас напали. Вони тільки красиво говорять, а толку ніякого. Їм взагалі вірити не можна.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Mark, now looking at this, while we know that U.S. delegation in Ukraine discusses peace talks, the war still goes on. How is this escalating situation going to affect peace talks, and will the peace talks still be effective? Also, who do you think should be the guarantor for Ukraine?
Agree with you again. We've just seen comments from the Ukraine, the deputy ambassador to the UN, where it's made very clear that the Ukrainians will not, they do not want to give up land. We remember that in February 2022, the Russians invaded a sovereign country. They're also concerned about the fact they are not going to be dictated to in regard to who they have their military allegiances with, and they are also not going to be dictated to how much being told that they have to reduce their army by. So that has been made very clear, and as you have said, the G20, the individuals down there, are reacting to this peace deal. Now, if you step out and reflect back on how Donald Trump, the Trump administration, may put negotiations forward, they would turn around and say, well, we have an extreme, we start from an extreme point of view way over here, say to the right, and then slowly come into the middle, into the center. The big issue is over land. There has been a sovereignty. The sovereign country has been invaded by another country and taken 20% of the land. And the Ukrainian authorities, understandably, and I'm sorry I couldn't see what that soldier was saying, but I can only guess, are turning around and saying, we have lost lives. We've lost thousands of our own soldiers. Look at the destruction of our own country, and we're turning around and going, no, we want Russia. Understandably, we want Russia out of our country. So assuming you are then going to have that stalemate. Also, the other thing is that, just to note on this, that's very interesting from what the Ukrainian deputy ambassador to the Ukraine has said, is this. Is to turn, when the Russians have and others have turned around and gone, well, hold on a minute, European nations, also under the Biden regime, they are then giving money, they are then giving armaments to then shore up and reinforce Ukraine against Russia. The Russians aren't pleased about that, and Ukraine say this is happening because we need to bring you to the table to genuinely discuss an end to this war, not a ceasefire, but to actually end this war. How you then do that within, as you said, the war continues, and within a framework where the Ukrainians understandably are saying no, and also when Putin says, as that soldier alluded to, turns around and says, well, hold on, Putin then says, well, he will defend us. Well, what has happened after the invasion from February 2022? And finally, remembering in 1994 under the Clinton administration, and then going on into further Minsk agreements, which is another discussion. But in 1994, which is Ukraine, hand over your nuclear weapons and we will defend you. As always, in all our conversations, Asuma, there's never enough time, but we have to go back historically and paint a huge arc to all of the events that have gone on before that lead up to this present time, Asuma.
Right, and sorry, Matt. Sorry. Yeah, can you tell us what do we know so far about what is included in the peace proposal made by U.S. so far?
Well, I think I've touched on the three major concerns for Ukraine, right? That then supersedes everything else. If they're turning around and saying, "Well, look, we're going to have to negotiate land for peace," also you are going to have to reduce the army, and also then it looks like who is going to be the protectorate of Ukraine. All of those issues are then. These are the comments that are being made in how Ukraine is then looking at this particular deal. And then, of course, if they're being asked, you've got to reduce your army, the military capability there, then that is not going to be acceptable to Ukraine at all, Asuma, because they were attacked. You can't argue with that whatsoever.
Yes,
Asuma.
100%. Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to our next news, Prime Minister Mark Carney has said that Canada will resume trade talks with the United States when it's appropriate. He has reinstated that. Carney, speaking on the sidelines of the G20 in Johannesburg, noted he does not have a pressing issue to address with President Donald Trump currently. Trump has suspended talks last month after Ontario's provincial government issued an anti-tariff advertisement. Carney has said that Canada is focused on its future and building new partnerships, adding that conversations with the United States president is unlikely within the next 2 weeks. Further emphasizing he remains open to dialogue but has no burning issue to discuss right now. Canada is seeking a deal to lower U.S. import tariffs on steel, aluminum, and automobiles. Let's welcome back Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for staying with us. Mark, now looking at this, as we see that Canada is kind of laid back, as their posture seems like they're awaiting after throwing the ball in the U.S.'s court, and they're not in rush. So what strategic advantages or risks does Canada face by prioritizing new global partnership while U.S. tariff issues remain unresolved?
Very interesting you say they seem laid back and they're not in a rush. Then I would suggest to you, you need to speak to people on the ground, especially in Alberta, in the west of the country, which is where the oil industry is based, an industry that Justin Trudeau, the previous Prime Minister of Canada, I'll try and be polite, has done whatever he could to undermine that industry. And Carney also has exactly the same mindset. I will put my cards on the table and say, Mr. Carney needs to put yes, of course, he needs to put the needs of Canada first, but he really needs to look at how to fire up the economy without the sort of climate change ideology that he comes from. We have to remember is when he ran the Bank of Canada, came over to the Bank of England. He's also been involved with the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, and now suddenly he is now running a country. I think the other question that constantly needs to be asked to Carney, why did he move Brookfield Asset Management? Was it before he resigned or after he stayed there into America, into New York? Now, we look back at the election. We look back at how he then played up when President Trump, we could say unhelpfully, was turning around and saying, well, we'll just take over Canada and have it as another state of America. But he needs to negotiate all these tariffs and trade deals as fast as he can. That it needs to be the number one priority. What has to be said, and was very rarely discussed, is the amount of refining of oil for America that Canada actually undertakes on its behalf as well, where energy also comes from in regard to what Canada, through hydroelectric power and more, then passes down to America. There is a real synergy there, and people need to work together. Under the Trudeau prime ministership, under their government, there were huge tariffs on dairy products that would then go into Canada. But my advice to Carney is start running Canada as a proper country and take the ideology out and start empowering the industry that is there up in Canada and get going, and also then get those negotiations going with President Trump as soon as possible. And I'll just end with this, that maybe with Carney, while he's at the G20, because he feels he's surrounded by friends, he can then sit back, as you said, and be very sort of relaxed about this and take time. Well, the Canadian people, particularly on the west side of the country, and there is a divide, that's a debate, a huge debate for another time that goes back down to Justin Trudeau's father. The key is this, is that Canadians are looking for industry, they are looking for jobs. They have been through hell and back, I would say, under the previous Prime Minister of Trudeau, and they want action. Because they have suffered a lot, particularly when they look at housing prices in various areas going through the roof. And there's a lack of understanding of rural Canada and the jobs that are needed in those environments. So Carney needs to look at Canada as a whole and not just make pronouncements from Ottawa, not knowing what he's actually talking about, in my humble opinion. And it's important. America is a massive, massive market for Canada, if not the world. And that's, in my humble opinion, is what he needs to get on and sort out right now. Asuma.
Yes. What do you think? What, as you highlighted, West Canada and mid Canada, especially mid Canada, like Alberta, they rely heavily and they are affected by these tariffs. What do you think? What cards can Canada play here in pushing or rushing U.S. to come to the table? What should Carney push U.S. on?
Well, the number one thing is, as we've just said, Alberta is on the west coast. If you look at the map, it's about, like in any country, including the UK, which is suffering from this ideology of stupidity, is that we have a substance called oil. Black oil, it needs to be drilled out of the ground, and it needs to be drilled out to the ground fast. Canada has those oil fields. It also has oil within sand that can then be refined, and that then helps to bring the cost of energy cost down, and then that means that people can start businesses. They can take the money that they are using to having to pay to keep warm, and remember, within certain parts of Canada, most people live within 100 miles of the American border, and as I have been reminded in a conversation very recently, you could then see temperatures go down to minus 45. How you even work within that environment is beyond me, but people do. It's then looking at the assets that Canada has, the minerals, etc., which are extremely extensive, and they need to then be extracted and then brought into to help their economy. That is not understood very often on the east side of Canada, because there is an ideology that is all split by this whole thing of environmentalism. And we haven't got time to discuss the goings on at COP30, but that has an impact on all of this. It goes back many years in looking at people like Maurice Strong, etc., within Canada, where this ideology has then stepped forward to say, we will not use the resources that Canada has that have been given to actually then benefit the nation. All of that is on the table, and unfortunately, Mark Carney comes from, as it said within a book he wrote, which I sadly don't have to hand right now, but I have a copy. Then is looking at he then looks at the world through all of these ideologies, Asuma. And that is one of the problems, and so did Trudeau, and that is one of the problems that Canada is facing right now. Asuma.
Right. So when you mention Trudeau, you mean Justin Trudeau or Pierre Trudeau?
I mean Pierre Trudeau, who nearly caused a civil war within the
Right.
Canadian country and divided it. And again, if people don't
Yes.
believe me, then go and look at history. There was a lack of complete respect
Yes.
to Western Canada, and in the past there has been put forward to then have an election about a separation of Canada, and there is also those discussions within Alberta where it then becomes a separate state, or even align itself with the state that it's joined to there in the northern states of America. That could still happen in regard to seceding, and that's what some people want then. Assuma.
Right. Well, we'll come to this issue someday, but thank you very much, Mark Sutherland, for joining us today and sharing that insight as a geopolitical commentator from London. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Middle East. At the start of Israel's weekly cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that Israel would continue striking Hezbollah and Hamas over ceasefire violations. Netanyahu also addressed the situation in Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire agreement and attempting to infiltrate Israeli territory. Netanyahu's office has confirmed that 5 senior Hamas officials were killed in airstrikes after a Palestinian gunman allegedly opened fire on Israeli troops. Rejecting criticism that Israel was seeking approval from Washington for its military actions, Netanyahu has firmly stated that Israel makes its own decisions regarding security, adding Israel is responsible for its own security. Netanyahu has also emphasized that Israel's commitment to neutralizing terrorist threats, stating the following.
בכמה וכמה חזיתות. בסוף השבוע הזה צה"ל יתקע בלבנון, ואנחנו נמשיך לעשות כל מה שדרוש כדי למנוע מחיזבאללה לבסס מחדש את כושר האיום עלינו. כך אנחנו עושים גם ברצועת עזה. מאז הפסקת האש, החמאס לא מפסיק להפר אותה, ואנחנו פועלים בהתאם. כל הדיבורים שאנחנו חייבים לקבל אישורים על כך מגורם כזה או אחר הם פשוט שקר מוחלט. אנחנו פועלים בלא תלות באף אחד. ההנחיות, הפעולות המיידיות לסיכול ההתקפות נעשות על ידי צה"ל באופן אוטומטי. לגבי התגובות זה עובר דרך שר הביטחון ומגיע בסופו של דבר אליי. ואנחנו מחליטים ללא תלות בשום גורם. וכך זה צריך להיות. ישראל אחראית לביטחונה.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Peter Baum. He's an editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us again. Peter, thank you. Now looking at this, what are the political implications of Israel asserting full independence from U.S. approval in its security decision with the situation given and their geography?
Yeah, I think when Israel undertakes tasks such as she has been doing, it has the backing of the Trump administration. You can rest assured that when Israel acts as she has been doing in the last couple of weeks in both the Syrian and Lebanese borders, and indeed in Gaza, that the Trump administration are fully aware of her actions and why she's undertaking those actions. So politically, I don't see any fallout with on this particular issue with Trump and the Israeli administration. However, there may be more consequences when it comes to the Israel's fallout with her European allies, such as France, Germany, and the UK. I think it's in that level of discussion where there could be more stronger words applied to what Israel is doing. But as far as the political situation with the Trump administration, I don't see any imbalance or any change to the status quo.
Right. And how might Israel's targeted strikes on senior Hamas officials, do you think it changes anything on the ground for Hamas, and does it push Hamas closer to disarmament?
This is a paradox, because clearly Israel's intelligence is now better than ever with regarding to the Hamas leadership, not only because of the close relationship Israel has with Hamas's enemies in Gaza, the Palestinian enemies, I should say, the family clans, but also the information they've been receiving from those in captivity in Israeli prisons, Hamas operatives. Now, by undertaking these actions, clearly Hamas's power is further diluted, militarily becoming ever weaker. But politically, it could strengthen the Hamas position with those anti-Israeli nations and organizations who are still using the false narrative that Israel is purposely targeting Palestinian civilians, women and children, etc., when she's not. She's targeting Hamas operatives, and very, very occasionally, I'm talking about in more recent times, there have been civilian casualties. So militarily, Hamas is definitely weakened. Politically, could be strengthened, although we don't see signs of that yet. Turkey and Qatar and the United States are still very much pressuring Hamas. And the other thing that we've learnt recently, which is all over some European media outlets, is that money that was raised for Hamas through charity concerts, through charities in Sweden, etc., has all been diversified to the Muslim Brotherhood. This has come as a very severe political blow to Hamas. The credibility of raising funds for the Palestinian cause and for the Palestinian people is now becoming under closer scrutiny than ever before, as funds were that should have gone to helping Hamas and the Palestinian people have done no such thing but gone into the coffers of the Muslim Brotherhood. So where Hamas thought that politically, by Israel breaking a ceasefire and by having Palestinians killed, there may be a political win, that's been undone, unfortunately for them, by the deflection of funds that should have gone into Gaza, going into the coffers of the Muslim Brotherhood. So again, I don't think any damage has been done to Israel politically because of these current strikes.
Right. Thank you very much, Peter, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in this topic. Israel's military has launched a new wave of air attacks across Gaza, reportedly killing at least 24 Palestinians. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency has confirmed that the strikes hit multiple locations across the territory, injuring 87 people. In Gaza City's Rimmel neighborhood, a drone strike has killed 11 people and injured 20 others. Medical teams at the Al-Shifa hospital has confirmed the casualties from that incident. Moreover, in Deir al-Balah region, the strikes have hit a residential house, killing 3 people. Emergency crews continue there to search for the area for survivors. Now we have managed to gather some voices from the Deir al-Balah region in the central Gaza Strip, where families are mourning relatives killed in these recent strikes. Let's listen in.
يقولنا هدنه او امنونا بشكل عام انه احنا في هدنه الفتره هاي، ولكن باختصار فجاه ضربه صاروخين بغمضه عين 13 14 شخص من عيله واحده، يعني انت بشويش عيلتي راحوا، ومن غير الاصابات اللي بتر رجل واللي بتر ايد 3 4. ليش؟ ايش السبب؟ ما حدا بيعرف.
امنين مطمئنين انه الحرب خلص خلصت، ففجاه يعني يجيهم صاروخ من الاحتلال يودي بحياتهم كلهم، يعني ما بقى غير البنت والابو في العنايه المركز. والله رسالتي انه نعيش في سلام وامان، زقنا كتر وموت وتشريد ونفقد ابنائنا وحبايبنا.
Now we move on. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir has summoned senior officers involved in the October 7, 2023 security failures for meetings aimed at ensuring sanctions, including potential dismissals. The meetings are part of an ongoing probe into the military's preparedness and response during the attack. The investigation, initially led by former IDF Chief Herzi Halevi, was expanded by Zamir in March, when he appointed an external panel to review the findings. The panel found the initial investigations to be inadequate, prompting Zamir's decision to take personal actions against senior officers. While the names of the officers and specific sanctions have not been disclosed, the IDF stresses that these decisions are part of efforts to rebuild public trust in the military and strengthen internal leadership. Among those summoned is Major General Shlomi Binder, the current chief of the Intelligence Directorate, and Major General Yaron Finkelman, former head of the IDF Southern Command. Similar meetings are also being held with lower-ranking officers. Now we move on to Europe. According to President Zelensky's chief of staff, the Ukrainian delegation has begun its work in Geneva. Andriy Yermak, the head of the Ukrainian delegation, spoke ahead of the talks with the United States, emphasizing that Ukraine is approaching the discussions in a very constructive manner. This marks a crucial step in the ongoing diplomatic efforts as both sides seek to navigate complex issues. The focus remains on cooperation and finding common ground, with both Ukraine and the U.S. committed to progress during these talks. Now for this discussion, we welcome Peter Baum. He's the editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Peter, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how might Ukraine's constructive approach in Geneva, how do you think this would influence the balance of leverage between Kyiv and Washington? What political challenge could rise between U.S. and Kyiv as Ukraine and U.S. attempt to find common ground now?
Yeah, I think the talks in Geneva will go nowhere. The feedback that I'm getting is that there are two very diverse opinions here on the geopolitical stage in order to bring this war to an end. It's clear that the Trump position has gone from being pro-Putin to pro-Zelensky to a mid-course, and now almost being anti-Ukrainian. There is no way, and I think your previous speaker mentioned this, that as it stands, there is very little common ground between the interested parties in this. I can see a major row erupting, or Trump will pacify those who are set against his, let's say, peace plan and make some necessary amendments. But at the moment, I can't see these discussions being successful for any party involved. The only party that is gleaning comfort from this diverse opinion amongst Ukraine's allies are Putin and the Russian government. It's a very depressing state of affairs.
So, Peter, why do you think Trump is pushing, U.S. is pushing now, even though you also mentioned that these talks might go nowhere? Do you think he has this motive of gaining some maybe voters back because of the government shutdown that it affected his popularity in U.S.? What do you think is his motive?
Now, that's a very good point, because it's apparent that the support that the US administrations, the previous Biden administration and now the Trump administration, have for Ukraine is very unpopular with the MAGA base domestically. The commitment, the financial commitment to Ukraine is very unpopular. However, I think Trump could override that because of the benefits economically that the United States would derive from the war ending and the, let's say, the rare mineral wealth that Ukraine has, which the USA would definitely be in prime position to economically take advantage of.
Yes.
So he has a very difficult balancing act to tread here, to placate the domestic audience who is set against the funding of Ukraine, whilst at the same time achieving his goals of the trade deals that he promoted some months ago with Ukraine. But incumbent on doing either is ending the war. And this is his difficulty, because his plan for ending the war is very unpalatable, not only to Ukraine, but to the European supporters of Ukraine as well, and which include obviously some NATO countries.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Peter Baum for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Thousands have gathered in Marseille to honor Mehdi Kessachi, the 20-year-old brother of anti-drug activist Amine Kessachi, who was murdered in a targeted attack. The shooting, which took place on November 13, is believed to have been aimed at intimidating Amine into silence. Demonstrators chanted justice for Mehdi before observing a moment of silence at the roundabout where he was killed. Mehdi's death has sparked nationwide calls for stronger action against drug crime in France. The tragic event highlights the ongoing violence linked to anti-narcotics activism. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome.
welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a quick check of the headlines this hour. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney once again reiterated, saying Ottawa will resume trade talks with President Donald Trump when appropriate, after Trump suspended negotiations last month over an anti-tariff ad from Ontario's government. Carney, speaking at the G20 in Johannesburg, said he remains open to discussions while the US. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told Italian President Giorgia Meloni at the G20 summit in South Africa that China welcomes more Italian companies into its markets and expects Italy to ensure a fair, non-discriminatory environment for Chinese investment, as both sides signaled a push to strengthen bilateral cooperation. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said it was shocking and accused Japan of crossing a red line and sending a dangerous sign when asked about earlier comments by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takichi. The diplomatic crisis has been rising over 2 weeks now and has spilled into trade relations, with China escalating the dispute to UN chief. Guinea-Bissau's 60,000 voters, cast ballots for 12 presidential candidates in a high-stakes election marked by the controversial execution of the PJ party. The vote comes amid decades of turmoil, including 4 coups and widespread poverty. Myanmar's junta says it has arrested 1,590 foreign nationals in just 5 days during major raids on the Shui Koko scam hub, seizing 2,893 computers, 21,750 phones, and over 100 Starlink receivers. The crackdown comes as internet scam networks continue to thrive in Myanmar's borderlands amid civil war. Russia's defense ministry reports that air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 75 Ukrainian drones over the past night. Drones were sighted over the Black Sea, Crimea, Bryansk, Belgorod, and other regions. US President Donald Trump says that his Ukraine peace plan is not final. This comes as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has left for Geneva to hold discussions on the Ukraine peace plan. According to Vietnam's Ministry of Environment, floods in Vietnam have claimed 90 lives, with 12 people still missing. Torrential rain and landslides have battered south-central provinces since late October. Viewers, Ukraine has launched a significant drone strike on a major heat and power station in the Moscow region. According to Governor Andrei Vorovok, multiple drones hit the Shatura power station, about 120 kilometers east of Kremlin. Unverified Telegram videos showed loud explosions followed by balls of fire rising into the night sky. Russian officials say several drones were intercepted by air defense systems, but others crashed directly onto the facility, igniting a huge fire. 3 transformers, each the size of a small apartment, caught fire and were badly damaged. Authorities say the blaze is now under control. With temperatures near freezing, backup power has been activated and mobile heating units deployed. However, at least one local resident reported having no heating. The incident comes as Russia continues targeting Ukraine's own energy infrastructure, and tonight's strike marks an escalation in the energy war between the two countries. Mohammad Usman, who is an international relations expert, is joining us live from Cairo. I welcome you, Mr. Usman, for joining us here on NewsX World. And now this is continuing between Russia and Ukraine, and even as Russia claims that it has intercepted 71 drone strikes, and missiles. There still has been significant damage to its Shatura power plant there. How do you see this proceeding from here on?
Thank you for having me, Kriti. Greetings to you and to your audience. It seems that the energy war, as you said, between Russia and Ukraine is escalating. Russia has been gradually degrading the Ukrainian energy infrastructure over the past few weeks using missile strikes and drone strikes on the energy infrastructure, on power stations, on gas refineries. And Ukraine is trying to do the same with Russia, with the purpose of hampering Russia's oil production and hampering its ability to export oil, which is the main driver of its of income in its economy, and also to try to make winter as hard as it can be on the Russians. But of course, there is no comparison. The damage Ukraine is doing to Russia's energy infrastructure is minimal in comparison to the massive damage that has been inflicted by the Russian military on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. So Ukraine is acting out of desperation at this point. And when we look at the situation in the field, Russia basically all but capturing Pokrovsk at this moment in the Donbass, capturing Kupiansk and Kharkiv, Leningrad is under siege. The Russians are advancing in cities